Hi everyone and welcome to UI5ers Live. Let's see what topics we have today. So firstly, we will look at some good practice architectures for freestyle UI5 applications. Then we will get into the details of the new deep create feature in the OData V2 model. And lastly, we would like to point out some best practices so your code works with different time zones. And for those topics, we invited experts again. And first of all, I'm very pleased that Holger Schaefer made it to us. Hi, Holger.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, I think Holger is working with UI5 right from the start, I believe, right?
Yeah.
You're a real expert when it's come to UI5 development. And yeah, you are also one of our first external consumer whenever we release a new functionality, which is also very cool. So you're always on top of everything what's going on in UI5, right?
Yeah, and luckily supported also by you.
That's really a cool collaboration we have here. Yeah, and then we have Kateryna Sergieieva and Eugen Reyzenkind, which you hopefully remember from our episode in July last year. Yeah, I'm glad you are here.
Yay, hello.
Yeah, hi.
And then from our ranks, or more precisely from the UI5 models team, Lars Kissel.
Hello.
And Sven Bernhard.
Hi.
Yeah, and then of course, here again, Stefan Beck.
Hi.
Peter Müßig.
Hi.
And Andreas Kunz.
Hello.
And with this, let's do it. And I'll hand over to Kateryna and Eugen.
So let me start. Again, very short intro about us. We're still coming from SAP Sustainability department, but the good news for us is that we extended our portfolio with 2 more applications because we joined a new project of SCT. Before we were like completely newcomers with just 1 app and the first experience in UI5. Now we're a little bit more trained, and the cool thing is that we switched from the JavaScript to the TypeScript. It's still UI5 freestyle, but on a TypeScript. And I will show you examples of the codes that we have, sometimes from JavaScript, sometimes from the TypeScript. So the new codes that we have. And just to wrap it up, our backend is always a Java CAP application if it is important. Our motivation overall, we're presenting our architectural approaches today. And why we're doing it is overall, this idea is quite important to us. UI5 is enormously flexible, especially compared to Fiori, unbelievably flexible. That's why we love it probably, but it definitely comes with a price of a lot of manual work and on a common cases that we might repeat from one project to the other, especially if you're working in a field of customer applications. So our intention that we have is to build kind of approaches or subsystems that we can reuse from the one project to the other for at least for the infrastructural subsystem. We definitely cannot cover the business cases, but we can work with the infrastructure and to have it done once and to reuse it further, and hopefully as today to share it with you. So yeah, let me show you the agenda. We have 3 approaches. They're much smaller than notification managers. That's why there are 3 of them. The first one is internal navigations and dialog manager and task manager. So let me start showing you that one. First of all, internal navigation. Overall, like, why do we care? Why do we come up to this? We bumped into unsafe changes problem. We do have a UI5 router, which works perfectly, but out of the box, definitely it doesn't support this interruption of the navigation. And we needed some systems that will do it for us. And during thinking of how we can handle it in a better way, our idea was to not only add this, to create some kind of approach, I would even say, module that will handle this interception, but also will give us a possibility to dispatch custom events that we do not rely on the UI5 router, because it's still kind of external objects that we cannot control if it changes the API or, I don't know, behave differently than we expect. It's a kind of, to define, as you can see from the diagram, kind of a wrapper that we that possess the extended functionality and encapsulates all the routing. So yeah, and another advantage, as I just mentioned, we have a possibility to define the custom events and not to listen to all of the routing events. So you can see that in the diagram, it's quite obvious. We have our view. Our views use internal navigation, so our side module, and they work directly with a router that in the box works with a browser, and from our internal navigation we do this event dispatching and have a possibility to change the code in other parts or views of the project. And let me show you some code, so how this can be implemented. The approach is not that complex, I would say. I hope you can see me switching to the VS Code right now. I'll show you the major parts. So the initialization, this is our internal navigation model. It's still a JavaScript part. So what do we have in there? First of all, as I said, this is an encapsulation of our router. This is exactly this UI5 object, router object, and we subscribe on router matched events, which probably all of you are doing by using the router, and we define where the navigation is going, master detail, and over here we can add any additional business logics that we require. In our case is this ID resetting, but also if you need to dispatch some custom event or add some additional business logic relevant to your navigation, you can do it here as well. And as I said, the third and the most important at the time for us possibility is the subscription for the events of the window in itself. So the hash change event, it's when the user changes from on a master view from one record to the other. The hash is changed and we know about that, so we can always tell him about, for example, unsafe changes. The same as before unload, this is a window event. When user leaves the application, closes the tab, we can also always know that and do something about it. That's pretty much it. We have additional functions here, but most of them are just simulating the navigation. And we have additional part, again, relevant at that time, that we can start and stop our navigations, this interception of the routing, but it's not, let's say, a common case. So this quite simple solution, but saves some additional time, and especially if, as I said, you have some complex navigation cases require interception, can be an interesting idea to think about. So let me get back to the presentation, and the next part that I want to show is the Dialog Manager. Again, starting with the motivation. Dialogs in UI5 typically is created, you create a fragment in a separate XML and you use the same view controller for the business logic in itself. And it happened to us that our controller, our view had a bunch of functionality, which our controller was already big enough. And the functionality of the dialog was also too many, part has to be included in there. So our controller grew significantly, and we felt like that it would be nicer for us to have it separated. It would be nice if the dialog would have a separate kind of controller. And it also would be good to control the life cycle of this control. If we have a separate control, we would like to have a control over the life cycle. Definitely we would like to have a very easy API. So it should be as simple as we have in UI5, so dialog open. So what do we have? And we created this kind of thing, and let me show how we use it, and then I'll show the ideas, like the approach in itself. So what do we have here? The first picture is how we start our dialogues right now with the help of our subsystem. We have the similar dialog option, but we send like a configuration object in there. In the configuration object, we define the ID of the dialog, we define the root view, we have configuration, I'll say a couple of words about it later, and we define the data that we want to set to send into the dialog controller. And in the afterwards, as a promise, we have an event handler, so-called. So our dialog, when it finishes or during its work of the dialog, it will send an event, and this event can be handled during this on moment, and afterwards we can do any pre-processing, not pre-processing, post-processing of the dialog work. Regarding the configuration, we just defined an enumeration that contains the static configuration for each of the dialogs that we have. What do we have there is location, so-called to our view, location of our controller for the dialog, and close events. Our dialog subsystem needs that in order to know when the dialog should be closed. So it waits for this kind of events to close the dialog. So let me come to the approach in the code. Yeah, here it is. So this is our dialog. It contains, it's already TypeScript, as you might see. It contains the dialog manager, main module, and dialog provider. Dialog manager, its main purpose is to contain the set of all the dialogs that we have and to provide the external APIs that application will use in order to open and close the application. And inside of this open method, the main point that happens is that the dialog provider, it's not exactly the wrapper on dialog, it's more like a class that just provides a dialog for us. So it creates all the necessary functionality of the fragment of the controller in order to deliver us the full logic. So yeah, here's the main part that is happening is like the opening from the provider, and all the list of the dialogs that we store here is the list of exactly these providers. So let me show like the most probably important part, how we collect our version of a dialog is that we do create a controller from, we get allocation, so we take it and we based on that we create a controller, then we set it up with the owner components, and then we do what UI5 does, create a dialog with the help of a fragment. And then we define the life cycle of the controller, so we can handle it on a different events if it's necessary. You can see it here on init, on data, on before rendering. Then we attach different close events. You can see that the events that we defined in our settings over here, we create again event handlers, that when that events are happening, we can handle them over here in order to close all the dialog and all the necessary information. And then we do open our dialog, wait till all the promises settle down and perform our final on after rendering event, and then we consider the dialog opened. This similar situation happens on closed. As I said, one of the events happens, like user select OK or cancel usually, and then we'll land in this on close event where we exit our controller, we clean up our root view, destroy the dialog, so we clean up the system out of all the information that dialog ever existed. And the small on event, and it's just a subsystem that I showed that we can handle this post-processing. It just it creates this event handling, like attach the event for the callbacks at what to do after the dialog is closed. We can do it over here. I think that's it from the dialog perspective. Yeah, I had it in a presentation more like in a step-by-step manner what is going on, but I think in the code it's a little bit more visible part. And the final one, the smallest one, and I would say is the most general one, and hopefully like the majority of you doing something similar. But yeah, I will give a grasp. Maybe somebody does not know about that. Task manager. So if you need to have a task in the background or do the recurring task, we all know that JavaScript, TypeScript, they have the set interval, set timeout, but sometimes you need a little bit more sophisticated. So it's easier to one time build quite a simple system to managing of this task. For this, you have a task scheduler and a task in itself. I define the APIs over here that we have with our interfaces. The idea is quite obvious. We have a task. it has this execution method and a time when the task should be executed, and a scheduler in itself that is start, stop, addition of the task, stop, and pausing. So all the necessary method to manage the task performance. In the usage, it looks like this. Again, super simple. We create the scheduler, we start it, create our task, add them, start the task, stop the task, and stop the scheduler. And yeah, a little bit of code in here. Yeah, so when we created a scheduler, we have a storage here. You can see the map of all the tasks that we have, and a ticker. I will say a couple words a bit later. Then we start our timer. So our timer, it works like a clock. We have this ticking interval, so amount of time when we check the task execution, for example, 10 milliseconds. I can even probably show you in the message over here. So yeah, every 10 seconds, we do check the tasks. All the tasks have their remain time. So how much time remain till the task should be executed. As I said, like in a clock, the task is scheduled for some appropriate time. So when this time comes, the task got executed and their remain got like updated for a new waiting time if the task is recurring. That's it. And yeah, and all the rest of the APIs, as I showed from the interface, we can stop them, add them, delete them, pause them, resume, and all the necessary information that is relevant to this manager. I think that's all what I wanted to share from my side. Thank you so much. If you have any further questions, ideas, feedback, you're very welcome. And maybe just to sum it up, we're having this as a third application already. We really see that to having this kind of approach is maybe not exactly this one, definitely depends on your application, whether you need all of that or not, but to create this kind of base of your own solutions and reuse them seems to be quite beneficial. For us, it was for the third application, like 30% of code we were capable just to transfer with the tests and to save our development time. So that is really a way to go. We can say, at least from our experience. Yeah, as I said, that's all from my side. Thank you so much. Any questions?
There was indeed a question. You opened it up. Marcel Schork asked about how do you share the modules across the applications? Are they encapsulated in an NPM package, or how do you do so?
Okay, I will answer myself. So basically, right now, because we don't have a lot of projects and we still try to detect common parts, we are just copy pasting this stuff. Yeah, as soon as we have more common parts, then we can create a Lisp libraries from this one, and this will be another topic for us because we want to understand how we can do it properly for UI5. So basically, if I would work with React or whatever, I just create in PMLib. Yeah, like it was mentioned here in the question. Here we need to still identify, is it possible to convert, or is it just a solution, and then it will come as a library.
If you want, we can discuss this definitely a bit more. So recently I also extended the UI5 ecosystem showcase for examples where you can consume libraries, TS libraries for TS application projects, TS modules. So maybe that's something we can show in one of the coming UI5ers live as well, a little bit more in details, and bring it up then. Also the idea to share a little bit more as NPM packages is quite nice and quite easy then to do so.
It would be great, I would say, from our side. So basically, from all these three subsystems that Katya present, two of them, so task manager can be already converted, basically. It's more or less final with all the tests and so on. And Dialog manager required some updates there. And about internal navigation, basically, I'm not sure. This is mostly concept because it's too different for different projects, I would say. You don't know exactly the goals for the next project. That's why it's really hard to detect what the parts are common here. So that's why I told you. So we need more projects to.
But if you want, we can go in a discussion and also prepare this then a little bit more as a showcase then as well for this round.
Yeah, it would be great. So basically.
Yeah, sure.
There was one comment also By the way, from Volker, he asked, the tests, are they VDI5 tests?
They are. We struggled, but we did it. It was our first experience.
So basically, I would say usually VDI5 tests are used for E2E testing. So basically, that was used by our DevOps to create this E2E test. But we have a solution how to adopt it to integration test to run this almost without backend. So probably at some later time we can share this experience. So basically, our goal is to create VDI5 tests not only for E2E testing, but also for integration testing with the same code base. That's an interesting challenge, I would say.
That would be also nice. So we have 2 follow-up topics. Note that down.
Now the time is really running, so we have to go to the next topic. Now, please, Holger and Lars with the next topic.
Yeah, we will now continue with the next topic, which is about the deep create feature in the V2 OData model. But at first, what is a deep create? In the OData specification, it is also defined as a deep insert, and it describes a create operation for an entity, which includes the creation of multiple dependent entities, but all in one single post request. And this feature is now supported for the V2 OData model since UI5 version 1.108. First of all, I would like to give you a short overview about the enhanced APIs and how to handle the deep creates. So to create entities for deep create, you can either use the OData list binding create function or the model, or from model side, the OData model create entry function. So you can see in the code snippet below, a deep create starts like a normal entity creation. This could be done with OData model create entry for a new sales order and with some sample data for the customer name. And the returned transient sales orders context can now be used, for example, to be set as binding context for a dependent table, which is bound to the navigation property to line items. And if this is done, the deep create is prepared and the application can easily use the list binding of this table to create one or many dependent line items using the OData list binding create function, for example, with some sample data with a node for item 0 and item 1. You maybe want to remove one entity from a deep create, and therefore you only need to call the context delete function on the item context you want to delete. But of course, the most important thing is to send the data, the complete deep create to the OData service. And for this, you just need to call submit changes on the OData model. The corresponding batch request would now contain only one post request for the sales order set. And in the body, we can see that there is the created sales order as well as the dependent line items for it. If you are now interested, you can find more information in the demo kit, in the documentation for the OData V2 model. There is a chapter creating entities with the new section deep create. Here is the deep create section, and here you will find all the information you need if you want to use deep create in your application. And yeah, I think that's enough basics from my side. So I will now hand over to Holger, who prepared a nice live demo with an application that is already using deep create.
Thanks to Lars, Matthias, and the whole OData Model 2 team. We nicely got this feature developed in 1808 range so far. That was a little bit ugly since 196, that most of these necessary hacks are no more working anymore. And this was from our side a customer request. And to directly test it and make it also a little bit available for others. I created a public repo for this stuff. And now that is what I will show next. So the problem is everything like this is maybe easy if you are talking about REP or CAP and OData version 4, and you have all this draft stuff. And the problem is all the customers that are on Business Suite and all the other things, that's a little bit more problematic. And also the newer things have new approaches like building blocks and the flexible programming model stuff. But we also have to develop for customers on the Business Suite with Gateway. And if you just have BAPIs that do not able to support this draft stuff, we needed another solution. So lastly, this demo is that we have a small CRUD application I created here with some nice gimmicks around this stuff to see it looks like a regular Fiori Elements application, but it's a plain freestyle application starting with UI5. So we have this kind of filtering stuff. It mimics a little bit the functionality of sales orders. So you will see a list of your sales orders, and then you can drill down into the details of a sales orders. Now we have an object page design here, and you will see this small smart table. So from this side, just pointing out the relevant items with an expand on the sales orders. We have also the necessary stuff here for some attachments. You will see there's maybe an image. So I also added here a pop-up viewer for this image kind, or maybe also that you have this SAP UI5 viewer for PDF files. Besides this, we also have this as a sidebar, especially in cases if you're creating things on larger stuff and you need to take care on the PDF file that is attached, and some of the information is necessary for creating this document. So you can, if you have a big screen, you can have this side by side while creating all this stuff. So far, that's everything that was working formally, but the nice new stuff is the functionality for the creating things. So what was missing? We have this kind here, want to create a new sales order. And for example, I have some header information. But besides this, the problem was formally to add additional information against this sales order. So transitional sales order was not the problem, but now we have a transitional sales order and wanted to create also transitional sales order items so far. And that was the problem in the past. Someone started to use maybe a local JSON model for this, so they coupled it, and at the end, merging this stuff together with this approach and whatever they did. Then there was some hacks that used an inline collection mode on top of this expanded stuff. But now, as you can see here, I'm using just a smart table bound to the sales order items. And you can directly edit this information using also smart fields and all these controls the way you would expect it from a data behavior, but without creating the sales order first and then having the need for creating the items, because in the underlying ABAP system, they expect the data in one post to the backend system so far, and that was not as easy in the past that this was possible. Concerning attachments, also a topic for itself in SAP. There's a reusable library for doing this with this attachment stuff. It's also a little bit complex to fulfill all the needs to use the attachment library that is similarly working like a draft service and doing this stuff. So therefore, I also added here some feature for us so that I'm able here to directly upload attachments using the upload set. But under the hood, the uploaded stuff is directly, the binary stuff is directly base64 encoded and re-added to the service itself so that it can be also posted with the deep post directly with one post so far. So now we can see we have entered some data. We will just having one post. And here we can see, okay, we have now this post on sales order head level. We have this customer header field, what we created so far. We will see we have this attachment stuff here. We have this inline edit data for the attachment file serialized. We have the file information. And we see we have our items so far, and that's the nice stuff. We will see later on also a little bit in the coding. So we can now nicely have one posting all this necessary data to the system. And that's it from the UI side. Generally, nothing more specific stuff, but was not possible in the past doing this directly. So what is part of the application? I created this package, or this JIT repo is a complete CAP project that nicely offers all the things you need. So you will have the general folder structure of a CAP project. You will see there's a service. Here in the results, there's also currently a log. You can see we posted just the sales order with the expanded data field so far. Generally, with CAP, you wouldn't do something like this because you would have OData version 2, you would have draft and all the relevant stuff. But if you do not have this information, luckily CAP offers something here that you have an OData version 2 proxy, and then it can just mimic all the necessary stuff so that you can also offer OData version 2 topics the same way like you have to develop with an ABAP developer in the gateway so far that you are a little bit more compatible. Okay, let's have a look. We have less time, so the more important, interesting parts. There's a UI5 Deep Create application. On top, there's also an application on top for bootstrapping this stuff. So you will also have a running example launching a Fiori sandbox stuff with your custom applications that can be launched. But the Deep Create application itself, the interesting part is just to found in the object page. And finally, you can see we are just using the UX RP object page layout design. And then somehow you will find the section how we organize here the forms so far for the header field. So you see now we can use here smart fields, smart forms, smart groups. Even this would be then possible to do this a little bit more annotation based if you want. There's also an older implementation for the table so far, but now with the final situation, we are able also to use a smart table. So the nice stuff about the smart table is you can have a nice switch to toggle between the editable mode and the view mode so far. So it can be used for just presenting data and also for editing data. The whole application itself is modeled a little bit after Fiori Elements version 4 because we want to be a little more compatible with the things we are doing in a new way, starting with Fiori Elements applications and then afterwards maybe just using custom pages. But here we are in the version 2 world so far, so we have just started with a small application itself, but anything else is also the naming stuff and helpers and all this stuff is a little bit forwarded after the API of your elements to be more compatible if you have to switch in customer projects between the old and the new world. You can also see, besides just presenting the fields the declarative way, if you need a custom controls like the step input, it's also no problem. You can have your custom step input here for this stuff, putting it into the smart table. And then the idea is that this crutch template will be as easy as possible for you to mimic or to adapt it to your own needs. And here we can also see the formerly used upload collection set was replaced by the successor of the upload set. And here is also all the necessary stuff available to directly take the uploaded data set and transfer it under the hood into data for the deep create set afterwards, so that you can just use this and copy and paste it into your projects and use it the same way. On the controller side, we will also have a look into the object page and just to see some interesting parts here. One of the things or the main things is if you have to develop the things the same way like Fiori Elements. Fiori Elements has a framework on top, and you have to use the page controller of your elements. So you cannot use the base controller so far and extend it this way. And what I did here is also following the same approach. So if you need some additional helpers, luckily SAP UI5 has a nice feature for so-called mixins that you can use controller extensions. And everything like this is now decoupled. You can see here this kind of edit flow. It uses the same API like the view element stuff so far for a lot of this functionality that is necessary. And then you can just import them and just annotate them here. And then it's easily to reuse them inside the controller code. And even this controller extensions can be used from inside the views. And then finally, that's the most of the stuff it's quite easy. And then we have very less code at the end. We will see here something for the add item stuff. So no hacks, no gimmicks in the past. We can just add some additional data here. And finally, we can just use the stuff that Lars had shown. We can just use the binding, create this with the data, edit at the end of the table. Maybe some hacks here that the item will be focused in the table after adding, but anyhow, so it's very clean and we will have nice code, and all the hacks in the past are no more necessary. So, and all the functionality that is necessary for this stuff is here decoupled in the edit flow controller extension so far. So here will be something that is used for this stuff, and you can have a look at this stuff, but at the end, we will have a project that would work out of the box the same way for your custom OData services. You just have to change a little bit annotations for the necessary fields that should be used. And with this stuff, you are able then, if you develop for a gateway, that you can just completely update this also to the gateway.
Thanks so much for sharing this. And then we have one more topic.
Today, I want to talk about dates, times, timestamps, and time zones. Maybe you have seen already in the Fiori Launchpad a setting for a time zone. Unfortunately, this setting is not yet considered in the UI5 applications. But in the last weeks, I spent a lot of time to check what would be needed to consume this configuration and start the applications also with a configured time zone. So first we introduced a URL parameter, SAP minus time zone, which expects an IANA time zone ID to be able to test applications with different time zones. So if this parameter is set, the time zone is used to format and pass all dates, times, and timestamps. And while analyzing some applications and some issues with these applications, we found two major issues. The first thing was that in some applications, there were some kind of timestamp shifting. So for example, they read data via an OData model, and all the date objects have been manipulated by creating new date instances by adding or subtracting, for example, time zone offsets, so that the applications could take this date object and use for example, a date picker with its date value property to display this data, so that they get the expected values on the UI. And after the user changed the values, they have to revert this timestamp shift again before the data is sent to the backend. And these manipulations of timestamps would not be necessary if the application had used the data binding with the corresponding data types. So maybe this information was not known, so we decided to create a documentation page in the demo kit in which we explained the differences between dates, times, timestamps, and how to use them best to be prepared for such a configured time zone. Yeah, and this is the page. This page will be updated in the next releases with more examples and more best practices. But at the beginning, you have this information: what are dates, what are times, and what are timestamps. So a date is a specific day within a year that is independent of any time zone. So for example, Sylvester 2022 is on 31st of December 2022, regardless of the time zone in which the user is. And this is also valid for the time. So it's a representation of an hour, a minute, second, millisecond within a day. And it is also independent of any time zone. So for example, if all shops of a brand open at 9 o'clock, they will open at 9 o'clock in whichever time zone the shop is. The only thing which considers the time zones is a timestamp. This is a point in time. For example, a meeting request, which starts, for example, on 2 o'clock in Honolulu time on 27th of November, which is the same point in time as 11 o'clock on the 28th of November in Australia, Canberra. So only for timestamps, these time zones are relevant. And we described also the different OData types that we have in the OData V4 and the OData V2 model with their corresponding UI5 types that we have to display or edit these data. So for example, in the date, you have the representation on the in the protocol, and this value is also stored in the model representation, and you can use this date type to display and edit these dates. And as you can see in OData V4, it is clear a date is a date without time zone information, and a time of day is a time without time zone information, and only the date time offset has this set, for example, for the Zulu time zone, which is time zone relevant. But in OData V2, it's a little bit more complicated, because here we have a date time with a constraint display format date and a date time offset, but the way the data is transported looks the same. It's more or less a JavaScript date representation. So milliseconds from Unix epoch. And the difference is that this date time with this display format date expected the date in the UTC time zone, and the other can be displayed in any time zone. So this was maybe the reason why the applications did some timestamp shifting. But if you would use the data binding correctly, then with the expected types, then it's much easier to consume that, and you don't need this ARCLY conversions. So for example, in the OData V4 model, you can simply bind the date picker and use the string-based property value and bind it against that property, which is a date. Then the framework takes care of everything, and you get the right model, the right value on the UI. And if you enter the data, the right value is stored in the model and then later on transported to the backend. And if you need for any reason a JSON model as an intermediate model, you have to specify the type that you want to use, and maybe the constraints. It depends on the type. But in the OData V2 model, we don't have this automatic type determination. So you have to specify for each binding the corresponding constraints and type information. And if you do so, then, as I said, the framework takes care that the data is properly displayed and transported. But this was only one of the issues that I found. Another issue that I found is the usage of JavaScript date. As you know, the JavaScript date provides some getters and setters for the UTC time zone and for the local browser time zone. So for example, if you have a JavaScript date, you can create a new timestamp, and you can use toString or to get hours to get the corresponding values. In this application, I used, for example, the time zone Pacific Kiritimati. So you have the configured time zone, and my local time zone is Europe Berlin. And as you can already see, the timestamps, or the timestamps, the dates are different in the UI, because the formatters and the parsers in the UI5 layer always consider this configured time zone to display the dates in that time zone. So the timestamp now is the 10th of February 23, 4 a.m. in the morning in Kiritimati. But in Central European time, it is the 9th of November the 9th of February, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, the getters, the local getters of the date, return the times, the value as expected in the browser time zone, and not as in the configured time zone that we have that we are using in the formatters. So this is one of the biggest issues there. So we decided to create a UI5 date class, which extends the JavaScript date and behaves like a JavaScript date, so that you can use a UI5 date instance in all cases where you have used a JavaScript date so far. The advantage of this UI5 date is that it considers the configured time zone. That means the local getters like toString or getHours are returning the values as you get also on the UI. They are considering the configured time zone Kateryna in this case. And this is also the case if I change something, for example, 10 o'clock PM, then you can see these values are still in sync and can be used. And yeah, as I already said, you can use this date, this UI5 date in the same way as you use the date, JavaScript date. The only thing is that you have to replace new date with UI5 date get instance. And why we decided to use this factory function, because if the time zone, the configured time zone and the local time zone are equal, then we want to return a JavaScript date, a pure JavaScript date, that we can profit from the native implementation of a date. That's the reason why we introduced this UI5 date. And for the data bindings, you can see here this example for the date picker. I'm now in the Kateryna time zone, and if I change the date to the 20th of January, you can see that the model value is expected. And also the relative parsing is possible. So currently we have the 10th of February, 4 o'clock in Kateryna time zone. And when I say in 5 days, for example, then you get the 15th of February. Okay, now we have 5 o'clock because, yeah, it's now 5 o'clock in Kateryna. That was the thing that I want to show. So the lessons learned that while analyzing this is that we cannot activate this FLP time zone in UI5 applications without code changes. At least applications or controls that are using date objects have to be checked whether they work or not. So we introduced also this sub-time zone parameter that you can test it. And we would recommend to test the applications with time zones like Pacific Honolulu or Pacific Kateryna, which are far away from the UTC time zone, to see whether the application still works as expected. And if you would use data binding with the corresponding UI5 data types, and if you bind the value properties of the date timestamp controls like the date picker, and if you would replace new date with UI5 date get instance, then we think that you're on a good way, that your application also works with a configured time zone. And as I already said, with this documentation here, we will update with each release with additional examples and best practices, and recommendations how to implement your applications, that the application also runs with different time zones. Any questions?
There is indeed one question, and Marcel wants to know this UI5 date, with which UI5 version was this introduced or will be introduced?
This is already part of the current nightly build, so in this, it is already part of the repository. So you have it already
So in the nightly, you can see it already and will be then part from in the next UI5 version, which is 112, right?
It is already in 111, I think. So it's already in the master branch, and 112 is, I think, the next.
It should come with 111. So at the moment we branched out already 111, and therefore the development version is 112.
So I really feel like at Wetten das, so overtime and whatever. But I think it were great topics, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was too short. Maybe we should really extend it. And thanks for everyone who stayed so long with us, especially to our panelists who stayed with me the whole time. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Holger, and thanks, Kateryna and Eugen, and also Lars and Sven. Great presentations, great content. Hope seeing you in one of our next episodes again. And with this, I guess we really have to run to the next retreat or whatever.
Thanks so much.
See you then. Have a good evening, good day, good afternoon. Bye bye.